Okay, here we are back again with more Dragon Age Origins, and I think we're going to go through some codex this time, because we got a bunch more to do. So here's a codex entry on the Archdemon. In darkness eternal they searched for those who had goaded them on, until at last they found their prize, their god, their betrayer, the sleeping dragon Dumont. Their taint twisted even the false god, and the Whisperer awoke at last in pain and horror, and led them to wreak havoc upon all the nations of the world, the first blight. That is from the Threnodies 8 verse 7. The false dragon gods of the Tevinter Imperium lie buried deep within the earth, where they have been imprisoned since the Maker cast them down. No one knows what it is that drives the Darkspawn in their relentless search for the sleeping old gods. Perhaps it is instinct, as moths will fly into torch flames. Perhaps there is some remnant of desire for vengeance upon the ones who goaded the Magisters to assault heaven. Whatever the reason, when Darkspawn find one of these ancient dragons, it is immediately afflicted by the taint. It awakens twisted and corrupted, and leads the Darkspawn in a full-scale invasion of the land. A blight. Here's a nice bear entry. Sure, bears, why not? No beast is more beloved by Dirthaman than the bear. When the world was new, Dirthaman gave one secret to each creature to keep. The foxes traded their secrets to Andruil for wings. The hares shouted theirs to the treetops. The birds sold theirs for gold and silver. Only the bears kept Dirthaman's gift deep within their dens. They slept the months away in the company of their secrets and nothing else. When Dirthaman discovered what had been done with his gifts, he snatched the wings from the foxes, silenced the voices of the hares, and turned the birds into paupers, but the bears he honored for their steadfastness. Transcribed from a Dalish tale, 9-8 Dragon. Normally, it is almost unheard of for bears to attack travelers. They are, in fact, so shy and so inactive during the day that most people never encounter a bear at all. However, should a bear be provoked, they are remarkably dangerous. The normally placid-seeming creatures become enraged and can strike massive blows with their paws, capable of knocking a man off his feet. Genlock. These are the most common darkspawn in the underground. Stocky and tough, Genlocks are notoriously difficult to kill, even by magic. Alphas. In any group of Genlocks, there's usually one who is dominant. As the tallest, strongest, and smartest of their kind, Alphas serve as a sort of commander, directing or bullying the others in combat. And of course, emissaries. The most intelligent of the Alphas become gifted sorcerers, with many abilities akin to blood magic. These are the emissaries, and they usually only appear during a blight. And Hurlocks. Taller than their Genlock cousins, the Hurlocks are roughly of human size, but are possessed of considerable strength and constitution. The shock troop of the Darkspawn, a single berserking Hurlock, can often be a match for numerous opponents at once. They are known to adorn themselves with roughly carved tattoos to keep track of their kills and deeds, though it is unknown whether or not there is a uniform standard to these markings. Alpha Hurlocks are more intelligent and more skilled fighters, often serving as commanders or even generals. And Hurlock emissaries have also been known to appear during a blight. These Darkspawn are the only ones recorded as being capable of human speech, and are often capable of employing magic. Creepy. Mabari Warhound. Dogs are an essential part of Ferelden culture, and no dog is more prized than the Mabari. The breed is as old as myth, said to have been bred from the wolves who served Dane. Prized for their intelligence and loyalty, these dogs are more than mere weapons or status symbols. The hounds choose their masters and pair with them for life. To be the master of a Mabari anywhere in Ferelden is to be recognized instantly as a person of worth. The Mabari are an essential part of Ferelden military strategy. Trained hounds can easily pull knights from horseback or break lines of pikemen, and the sight and sound of a wave of war dogs howling and snarling has been known to cause panic among even the most hardened infantry soldiers. Nice. An ogre. Towering over their Darkspawn kin, the massive ogres are a rare sight on the battlefield. Traditionally, they only appear during a blight, but some records claim that ogres have been spotted in the deep roads, hunting alone or in small groups. At least one report by the Grey Warden's claims that an ogre was spotted alone in the Korkari wilds in 919 Dragon, though it was weakened and easily dispatched. Up to 100 of these creatures can accompany a Darkspawn horde at any one time during a blight, often using their great strength to burst through fortifications and demolish the front lines of the opposing army. They use brute force to charge their enemies like bulls, slam the ground with their fists to shake enemies off their feet, and hurl giant rocks into the face of oncoming foes. Melee can be difficult against a giant that snatches a warrior up in one hand, crushing the life out of him or beating him into oblivion with the other hand. The nimble can try to wiggle his way free, or an ally can attempt an array of stunning blows on an ogre to free the comrade in danger. This is telling us how to beat him, basically. If an ogre picks up a warrior member of your party, you can use a stun spell on them to try to knock them down. Otherwise, you might be dead. Grey Warden lore urges caution when slaying an ogre. Unless it is ensured that they have received a major wound to the head or the heart, it is possible that they are lying dormant and will regenerate to full health within a matter of minutes. During a blight, most Grey Wardens recommend burning all Darkspawn to ashes, dead ogres in particular. Good to know. Oh yeah, here's our thing about Mabari dominance. Mabari hounds are descended from pack hunters, and like their ancestors, they are highly influenced by a defined order of dominance. The primary method of determining that order is by claiming territory through scent marking major landmarks. Once established, the dominant Mabari gains a substantial increase in confidence and stature within his territory, a trait that indirectly benefits master as well as hound. Basically, you want to keep going with the Mabari dominant thing. Okay, so we got some more magic and religion stuff. Here's a codex on the Imperial Chantry. So this is basically the Tevinter Imperium's version of the Chantry, which is a little bit different from the rest of Thedas. There are those who would tell you that the Chantry is the same everywhere as it is here, that the divine in Val Royeaux reigns supreme in the eyes of the Maker, and that this fact is unquestioned throughout Thedas. Do not believe it. The Maker's second commandment, magic must serve man, not rule over him, never held the same meaning within the ancient Tevinter Imperium as it did elsewhere. The Chantry there interpreted the rule as meaning that mages should never control the minds of other men, and that otherwise their magic should benefit the rulers of men as much as possible. When the clerics of Tevinter altered the Chant of Light to reflect this interpretation of the commandment, the divine in Val Royeaux ordered the clerics to revert to the original chant. They refused, claiming corruption within Val Royeaux, an argument that grew until, in 487 Towers, the Chantry in Tevinter elected its own legitimate and uncorrupted divine, Valhale, who was not only male, but also happened to be one of the most prominent members of the Tevinter Circle of the Magi. This black divine was reviled outside Tevinter, his existence an offense to the Chantry in Val Royeaux. After 4 exalted marches to dislodge these rebels, all that the Chantry in Val Royeaux accomplished was to cement the separation. While most aspects of the Imperial Chantry's teachings are the same, prohibitions against magic have been weakened, and male priests have become more prevalent. The Circle of Magi today rules Tevinter directly, ever since the Archon Namarin was elected in 734 Storm, directly from the ranks of the Enchanters, to great applause from the public. He dispensed with the old rules forbidding mages from taking part in politics, and within a century, the true rulers within the various imperial houses, the mages, took their places openly within the government. The imperial divine is now always drawn from the ranks of the first enchanters and operates as divine and grand enchanter both. This is utter heresy to any member of the Chantry outside of Tevinter, a return to the days of the Magisters, which brought the blights down upon us. But it exists, and even though we have left the Tevinter Imperium to the mercies of the dread Kunari, still they have endured. Further confrontation between the Black Divine and our so-called White Divine is inevitable. From Edicts of the Black Divine by Father David of Carinus, 811 Blessed. So that's a really interesting, and it's a really interesting take on, of course, the real-world schism of the Roman Catholic Church. So yeah, that's it's really cool that the Tevinter Imperium has their own divine. He's always a male as opposed to the always female divine in Val Royeaux. And he's also always a mage, taken from the first enchanters of the Circle of Magi in Tevinter, which is really interesting. Here's a codex entry on the Sacred Ashes of Andraste, which, of course, we've heard mention of this now in Lothering. We talked to a knight who was looking for the Sacred Ashes. Only one person witnessed Maferath's betrayal, Havard the Aegis. A childhood friend of Maferath, he accompanied his chief to the meeting with the Tevinters, not realizing what was planned. When he understood that Maferath was giving Andraste over to be executed, Havard, unwilling to draw swords against his friend and liege, placed himself between Andraste and the Tevinter soldiers. The Tevinters struck him down, and Maferath left him for dead. Gravely wounded, Havard made his way to the gates of Minrathous to stop the execution. When he reached it, the terrible deed was already done, the armies on the plains long since dispersed. Havard, cursing his weakness, gathered the earthly remains of Andraste that had been left to the wind and rain, and wept. When his fingers touched the pile of ash, his ears filled with song, and he saw before him a vision of Andraste, dressed in cloth made of starlight. She knelt at his side, saying, "The Maker shall never forget you so long as I remember." The song faded, and the vision with it, and Havard was alone, but his wounds were healed. With new strength, Havard took up the ashes of Our Lady and bore them back to the lands of the Alamari. Fearing that Maferath's supporters would defile them, Havard took the ashes of Andraste to a secluded place high in the mountains, and there he carved from the living rock an urn to hold them. Time passed, and the whereabouts of the urn faded from memory. Perhaps it was the Maker's will that only the most worthy should find his beloved's final resting place. Now we have only the legends, such as that of the Chevalier Lothaire, who quested to find the urn to save his dying daughter, and either found it in time to cure her, or returned 100 years after her death. The ballads end less than certain on that point. From Thetis, Myths and Legends by Brother Genetivi. So, I'm sure that probably will play a role eventually. So, here's the history of the Dryadens, after talking to Levi Dryden. In the years following the siege of Soldier's Peak, all those who carried the Dryden name were hunted by King Arlen's forces. Our noble Dryden name was smeared, and all lands and holdings belonging to the Drydens were seized by the crown. The king feared that the rebellion started by Sophia would be kept alive by her loyal friends and family, and anyone with connections to the Drydens suffered greatly. It is little wonder, then, that the few remaining Drydens found themselves with no allies and nowhere to turn. Tobin Dryden, Sophia's brother and guardian of her young son, had no choice but to flee Ferelden. Tobin bought passage to Antiva on a merchant vessel and traveled under the name Derrisher. Once in Antiva, Tobin set about building a new, quiet life for himself and his nephew. He started a small business and eventually made a name for himself as a trader. The Derrisher merchant family prospered, and the name Dryden was almost forgotten. However, in 815 Blessed, Sylvie Derrisher uncovered old documents belonging to Tobin and pieced together the family's history. In her pride, and perhaps in her naivete, Sylvie reclaimed the name Dryden and returned to Ferelden. King Arland lies dead, and the Dryden name lives on. Our family has survived, even thrived, since the death of Sophia Dryden. The nobles of Ferelden may still spit on the Dryden name, but we Drydens know that Sophia Dryden was greater than them, almost a queen and a hero of the people of Ferelden. From the personal files of Levi Dryden, merchant. And here's a nice little entry on the Chastened, which we've kind of heard mentioned a couple of times, but we don't really know a lot about them, and they don't really seem to play a major part in things. They're just kind of exist on the fringes of Ferelden society. The Chastened Wilders have lived in the Korcari wilds since the first wars with the Alamari drove them southward a millennium ago. According to their own lore, they had always been a forest-dwelling people that adapted quickly to their new home. Game and fish are plentiful in the wetlands, and the Chastened thrived. For a time, they and the hill-dwelling Avars were true threats to the northern lowlands. The Tevinter Imperium had arrived and was hard-pressed to keep back the waves of invasions from the south and the west. The fortress of Ostagar was built specifically to watch for Chastened hordes venturing north of the tree line. It was not until the legendary warrior Hafter soundly defeated the Chastened in the first half of the Divine Age that the question of their ability to contest the lowlands was settled permanently. Today the Chastened are considered largely peaceful, though their ways are still primitive compared to our own. In the Korcari wilds they live in strange-looking huts built on stilts or even built into the great treetops. They paint their faces and are split into small tribes ruled by shamans like those amongst the Avars. There are many tales of these shamans having learned their magic from the witches of the wilds, witches that inspire as much terror as they do awe and gratitude, even if there is no definitive proof they exist. In particular, the tale of Flemeth, the greatest witch of the wilds, is celebrated amongst all tribes. While there is no way to know how many there are in the wilds today, few travelers that pass through the forests tell of Chastened eking out an existence even in the frozen wastelands of the far south. One can assume that should the Chastened ever organize themselves once more, we might have reason to fear them here in Ferelden. We ignore them at our peril. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. And that's it for that one. Let's do this one next. Adventures of the Black Fox. This is a codex entry we found in the Chantry in Lothering, I believe. Born Lord Remy Vaskell in 863 Blessed, the Black Fox was a dashing thief and rogue who went on to inspire so many tales of his exploits that it is nearly impossible to determine today which are true and which are merely fabricated legend. Despite coming from nobility, he has become something of a hero of the common people. So yeah, that doesn't sound at all like Robin Hood, does it? His initial exploits involved ridiculing the tyrannical and powerful lord of Valchevin. Wearing a mask, he would appear in public and disrupt the lord's plans to the point that the lord angrily put a huge bounty on the life of this cunning fox, the origin of the nickname which stuck. That the primary bounty hunter who took the job, Carolus, ended up becoming Remy's lifelong partner in crime only after nearly killing him several times is one of the most popular tales told in taverns today. The story is often exaggerated to make Remy appear initially buffoonish until Carolus becomes so furious at the Black Fox's inexplicable ability to survive that the cunning Remy gains the upper hand, which impresses Carolus so much that the bounty hunter joins him. After years of terrorizing the Lord's men and foiling his tax collectors, a favorite pastime of Remy's, according to the Orlesian commoners, Remy was supposedly betrayed by his lover, Servana de Montfort, in some versions of the tale a mage of the Circle, no less, and captured. After more than a year of torture, Remy was rescued from prison by his compatriots, including a repentant Servana, and together they escaped Orlais. In this period of Remy's adventures, he appears almost everywhere in the Thedas. As his legend grew, more innkeepers and merchants were happy to claim that the Black Fox had visited their village or establishment and performed some legendary feat. If the tales are to be believed, Remy led the Lord's men on a merry chase. He became embroiled in political intrigue in Navarra, was hunted by the crows of Antiva, and then kidnapped by a powerful mage in Tevinter. In each situation, Remy escaped death at the last moment, foiled the evildoer, and improved life for the poor and downtrodden. Then, inevitably, he rejoined his band of adventurers and moved on to the next land. His companions Carolus and Servana, the wise dwarf Bolek, and the tempestuous knight Sir Clementis have each spawned their own individual legends over the years. The stories all agree that at some point the Black Fox disappeared. He and his fellow adventurers voyaged into the heart of the Arlathen forest, seeking the sunken city of the elves, and never returned. Many more are the tales that expand on what ultimately happened to them in that forest, and postulate on how they could someday be rescued. From The Adventures of the Black Fox by Gaston Guirol, 9/11 Dragon. The First Blight, Chapter 1. Thedas is a land of fierce diversity, from the assassin princes of Antiva to the fated griffins of the Anderfells. But in my travels I found one tale that unites the people of this land. It is a story of pride and damnation, and although the telling differs, the essence of the tale remains the same. At the height of its power, the Tevinter Imperium stretched over much of Thedas. uniting the known world under the rule of the tyrannical magisters. It is said that the old gods whom the magisters worshipped gave them the knowledge of blood magic, and the magisters used this forbidden power to cement their rule. The blood of elven slaves and humans alike ran down imperial altars to fuel magister greed, the tales of their excesses so horrifying that one can only be grateful that blood magic is prohibited today. But all that stands tall must eventually fall. Perhaps they foresaw their ruin, or perhaps their pride knew no bounds, but whatever the reason, the magisters dared to open a magical portal into the Golden City at the heart of the Fade. They sought to usurp the Maker's throne, long left unattended in the Golden City after the Maker turned his back on his creations. They would storm heaven itself with their power and become as gods. This is what the Chantry, in its oft-exercised tendency to understate, refers to as the second sin. According to most versions of the tale, the Magisters did indeed reach the Golden City and walked into the home of the Maker, where no living being before them had dared or been able to tread. But humanity is not meant to walk in heaven. The Magisters were wicked with pride and other sins, and their presence tainted the Golden City. What once was a perfect, holy citadel became a twisted home of darkness and nightmares. The Magisters were expelled back through their gateway and cursed for their treachery. As the Golden City had been tainted, so were the Magisters twisted and transformed into things of darkness, the very first of the Darkspawn. The Golden City, once a shining beacon at the heart of the Fade, became the Black City, a reminder of all that man's pride has cost. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas by Brother Genitivi, Chantry Scholar. Alright, now we just have some characters to look at. We know a little bit about Alistair. Of course, he was a novice Templar when Duncan recruited him into the Grey Wardens, or rescued him, as Alistair would say. His mother was a serving girl who died when Alistair was very young. He was raised by Eamon Guare and Arl of Redcliffe for a time. Queen Anora is the only child of the war hero Logain MacTyr. Anora has never been one to stay quietly in the background. It is common knowledge that in the 5 years Anora and Kaelin held the throne together, she was the one wielding the power. She is held in much higher esteem than her husband by the people of Ferelden, nobility and commoners alike, and commands the respect even of foreign nations, having once inspired Empress Selene of Orlais to declare, "Anora of Ferelden is a solitary rose among brambles." We know, of course, Kaelin was the son of legendary King Merrick Theron. He was the first Ferelden king born into a land free from foreign rule in 2 generations. He held the throne since his father's death alongside Anora, and he fell in battle at Ostagar. Here's Cothrian. Cothrian came. She's basically Logain's lieutenant. She's the one who basically ordered the retreat at Ostagar. Cothrian came to Logain's service the hard way. She belonged to a poor family and was out doing work on the farm when she saw a man on horseback being attacked by several bandits. She rushed to his assistance and found out belatedly that the man she saved was none other than the great hero Logain. Though she was hardly more than a child, he took her in, offering her a position with his soldiers, and she climbed through the ranks through sheer determination. Becoming the commander of Merrick's shield, Logain's elite soldiers, was the proudest moment of her life. Yep. And this is our Barkspawn. Our dog has an entry. And of course, we know that Duncan was killed at Ostagar. Arl Eamon, he's the maternal uncle of King Kaelin, and he's one of the king's most trusted advisors. Redcliffe, while not a large or especially wealthy part of Ferelden, is a critical strategic location. The fortress guards the western pass that leads to Orlais, as well as the major trade route with Orzammar. A well-respected man, though not the most charismatic, King Kaelin once said of him, "My uncle Eamon is a man everyone thinks well of, when they remember to think of him at all." He fell ill with a mysterious condition that even magic could not treat, so that's where we are right now with him. Here's Flemeth. Flemeth's got a nice long entry. Ages ago, legend says that Ban Conobar took to wife a beautiful young woman who harbored a secret talent for magic, Flemeth of Highever, and for a time they lived happily until the arrival of a young poet, Ozin, who captured the lady's heart with his verse. They turned to the Chasen tribes for help and hid from Conobar's wrath in the wilds, until word came to them that Conobar lay dying. His last wish was to see Flemeth's face one final time. The lovers returned, but it was a trap. Conobar killed Osen and imprisoned Flemeth in the highest tower of the castle. In grief and rage, Flemeth worked a spell to summon a spirit into this world to wreak vengeance upon her husband. Vengeance she received, but not as she planned. The spirit took possession of her, turning Flemeth into an abomination. A twisted, maddened creature, she slaughtered Conobar and all his men, and fled back into the wilds. For 100 years, Flemeth plotted, stealing men from the Chasen to sire monstrous daughters, horrific things that could kill a man with fear. These Korkari witches led an army of Chasened from the wilds to strike at the Alamari tribes. They were defeated by the hero Cormac, and all the witches burned, so they say, but even now the wilders whisper that Flemeth lives on in the marsh, and she and her daughters steal those men who come too near. Morrigan's mother saved the last Grey Wardens from death at the top of the Tower of Ishal, but just who or what Flemeth truly is a mystery. So Liliana is, of course, the lay sister of the Chantry, as she explained to us. Loghain was born a farmer during a time when his country was under foreign occupation. When he was still a boy, he joined the resistance, where his considerable tactical genius quickly became apparent. He became close friends with Prince Merrick, the last true heir to the Ferelden throne, and together they led the rebels to drive out the forces of the Orlesian Empire. Merrick raised his friend to the nobility, and Loghain is now more of a symbol than a man. He represents the Ferelden ideals of hard work and independence. During the battle at Ostagar, he fled the field, leaving King Cailan and the Grey Wardens to die. He then returned to Denerim and declared himself the regent to his daughter, Queen Enora, demanding that Ferelden follow him against the Darkspawn, upsetting a great many of the bands. Morrigan's, which we pretty much know everything about her right now. Sten. The northern islands are remote, lush jungles that harbor cities rumored to be the most extraordinary ever built. These are the lands of the Kunari, lands that no foreign eyes ever see. Only the stories of the 3 exalted marches waged against the giants have reached the south, until the arrival of Sten. The stoic giant in the cage was surely the strangest thing the people of Lothering had ever seen until the blight struck. Bantegan is the guy who was yelling at Loghain at the Landsmeet in the cutscene earlier. He's Arl Eamon's younger brother. And Sophia Dryden's Codex. Arlessa Sophia Dryden was the young Arlen's rival for the throne of Ferelden. Dryden was a strong and charismatic leader with much support from the Banorn. When Arlen finally won the crown, Dryden refused to relent. She pushed her claim, was caught, and accused of treason. Her sympathizers continued to support her, however. In order to appease them, Dryden was spared execution and forced to join the Grey Wardens instead. Dryden survived the joining and dazzled the Grey Wardens at Soldier's Peak with her leadership skills and charm. She eventually rose through the ranks to become the Warden Commander of Ferelden. Before Commander Dryden, the Grey Wardens were seen as a relic of an older time and an unnecessary drain on the nobles' coffers. Dryden, though, with her political connections, reinvigorated the Wardens and rapidly increased their numbers. In the meantime, King Arland proved himself a devious king, willing to go to brutal lengths to silence his opponents. Arlen's reign of terror grew worse with each passing year, and some of the bands approached Commander Dryden in desperation, begging her to intercede. She agreed, and thus was the rebellion against King Arland born. Arland learned of the rebellion and took steps to end it. He publicly suspended all tithing to the Grey Wardens and declared that they were no longer welcome in Ferelden. Some of the Wardens, mindful that they were supposed to remain politically neutral, felt disgraced by Dryden's involvement in Ferelden politics and left her side even as the king's forces lay siege to Soldier's Peak. The siege took months and ended with the death of Sophia Dryden. From the personal files of Levi Dryden, merchant. So that's basically the story of how the Grey Wardens were expelled from Ferelden several centuries ago. It was a rebellion against the king. Wardens are not supposed to get involved in politics, and Sophia Dryden involved herself and got burned, basically. So that's the DLC that we'll be doing, which is Soldier's Peak, where we'll go to try and learn more about the fate of Sophia Dryden and those Grey Wardens. But next time, I think we'll probably... Yeah, Soldier's Peak. I think next time we might start Broken Circle, because I think, as I said before, I think Ariadne's first choice would be to go straight back to the Circle, especially after hearing some rumors of some bad things happening there. She definitely wants to sort of check that out, see what's going on, make sure everything's okay, and recruit her, her mentor, First Enchanter Irving. Make sure she's got him on her side. So yeah, that's probably what we'll do next time. So as always, if you like what you see, please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. Later.